Okay, everyone, today we're going to look at notes for 12.5a, which is multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Today we're actually only going to look at multiplying. So one thing that is super important for you before we really get into this lesson is to remember how to multiply. So when you're multiplying fractions, remember you're just going to multiply straight across. So in this example, when I have 1/2 times 3/4, I'm just going to take and multiply 1 times 3 to get 3. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the denominator. So I'm going to take 2 times 4 and get 8. And then, if necessary, you would simplify that. In this case, it's already in its simplest form, though. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, in your notes, write this first example. So if you need to pause the video to do so, please do that. And then again, we're multiplying two fractions, so we're just going to multiply the top numbers and multiply the denominators. So I start by looking at the numbers. So I've got 2 times 6, and that's going to give me 12. And then I've got x squared times x squared, and that's going to give me x to the 4th. I'm going to do the same thing with the denominator. 3 times 12 is 36. And then this is really x to the 1st times x to the 3rd, and that's going to also give me x to the 4th. And this is like what I was talking about on the last slide. We're going to have to simplify this. So I have to ask myself, first looking at 12 divided by 36, 12 goes into both of those, so I'm going to be left with 1/3, because 36 divided by 12 is 3. And then you've got x to the 4th, so if you just kind of look over here on the side, x to the 4th divided by x to the 4th. Since you have the same thing in the top and bottom, it's actually 1, so your final answer in this case is 1/3. Okay, and the last question that we have to answer on this problem is, what is the excluded value? So to figure that out, we're going to look at, before we really okay, so sorry about that. The last thing that we need to ask ourselves is what the excluded value is. And to do that, we're going to go back right before we simplify it. So we're looking at our denominator right here, and we're going to set that equal to 0. So I'm going to have 36x to the 4th equals 0. You divide both sides by 36. Some of you may already see the answer. When you have x to the 4th equals 0, you'd actually take to the 4th root, I guess you'd say, and you're going to end up with x equaling 0. So your excluded value is 0.
All right, this one's looking a little messy, so why don't you guys take a second to write this one down, press pause if you need to, and then we will work through this one. Alrighty, this one's going to be a little bit different than you did with Miss Olson. We can't just multiply straight across because of all those plus and minus signs there. So what we need to do is break them down and factor them as far as possible. So we're going to do each numerator and denominator separately. So 3x squared plus 3x, I can factor out a 3x, and I'm left with x plus 1. In the denominator there, alright, in the denominator there, I'm going to factor out a 4, and I'm left with x squared minus 6x plus 9. And I'm going to leave it that way for just a moment, and I'm going to do the other side now. So on the top there, I can see that what multiplies to 3 and adds to 4.
-4, right?
Yep, -4 is going to be a -3 and a -1 And in the bottom there, I can factor out an x. So I'm left with x minus 1. Okay, what I'm going to do is factor out that top and bottom and write on 1 long there. So, kind of like Miss Olson showed you back on the very beginning, we're going to just take this and multiply straight across, like she showed you that arrow, except for I'm going to write it all the way across. I'm going to write 3x, x plus 1, x minus 3, x minus 1, and leave it. On the bottom there, I'm going to factor out that x squared. So that's going to be x minus 3 times x minus 3. And then keep on going. So on that second denominator, I have x and then an x minus 1. Now, as you see, this is as far broken down or as factors as it can go. So what you're going to do is cross out anything that's the same in the numerator as is in the denominator. So for example, I see I have an x minus 3 and an x minus 3. I have an x minus 1 and an x minus 1. And then I have an x and an x. So what I'm left with is my solution. So I'm left with 3 times x plus 1 in the numerator and 4 times x minus 3 in the denominator. And that's as simplified as you can make this rational expression. And so that is your solution. What the next question is that we have to ask is the excluded values. When you find your excluded values, you're going to go back to the most simplified version, which is this most factored out denominator right here. And you're going to take everything that is has an x with it, and you're going to set it up equal to 0. So I'm going to have that 4x equals 0. I'm going to divide both sides by a 4, and so x equals 0. I'm going to set up, now I'm going to set up x minus 3 equals 0. You're going to add 3 on both sides. So x equals 3. And then lastly, I have x minus 1 equals 0. So x equals a positive 1. So my excluded values is 0, 3, and 1. You need both parts to have your full answer correct.
Okay, this is, I believe, the third and final problem that we're going to do together, but don't worry, we still have a few that you can try on your own. So as we look at this one, and you write this one down in your notes, you'll notice one thing is a little different about that second fraction. There is no denominator. I'm just going to quickly put in a denominator of 1 because that doesn't actually change it, and that makes it easier for me to multiply straight across. So when I multiply across, I'm going to keep my 5x separate from my x plus 3. And then I'm going to factor my denominator. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be 6 and add to be 5. And I'm going to get x plus 3 and x plus 2. And you'll notice that there is a x plus 3 in the numerator and in the denominator. So you can actually cancel those out. And you're going to be left with 5x divided by x plus 2. And that is, in fact, all you can simplify on this. So that's your final answer. But like Ms. Zarnes was saying, we need to figure out our excluded values to get full credit on this one. So I'm going to go back before I started canceling things out. And my denominator was x plus 3 times the quantity x plus 2, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. So that's really like x plus 3 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. I subtract 3 from both sides. Okay, so x can equal negative 3. That's one of our excluded values, and the other one, I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides, so x equals negative 2. So your excluded values are negative 3 and negative 2. And again, make sure you have both parts to get full credit.
Okay, after seeing me and Miss Olson do a few of these with you, write these two down. The first one is a little bit longer, so take your time. Write both of them down, show all of your work, and pause the video. Try these on your own, and then when you're ready, have the sub push play and check your work. All right, for number 1, check that you have 2 times the quantity x plus 1 divided by 5 times the quantity x minus 2. That is the most simplified version that you can get, and your excluded values are 0, negative 2, 2, and 1. You need all of them to be correct. For the second one, your solution is 2w squared divided by w minus 3. And again, your excluded values are 4 and 3, and you need both parts to get full credit. So just double check, maybe see or ask somebody what your mistakes were, if you didn't get the correct numbers or parentheses were misplaced. Take the remainder of the hour to work on your homework, ask questions, and we will be back tomorrow.